what's the first thing you need to think about if you're trying to find what your true north is as a leader?
Um, Good question, and that's the question I always ask leaders. So good start, right? Um, and I think it's back to basics or a first principles concept. So um, any leader will be able to look over their history or their career and know moments that have been peaks and have known moments that have been real challenges or lows. And typically examining both of those is useful, but understanding what was at play when you were in flow or at your peak is a really good place to examine, right? And so what you'll find is um, that will be a combination of the event you're involved in, the circumstances surrounding that, perhaps the people you're working with, and what you were doing. And then that's a really, really good hint to where your true north might be. So as an example, keeping it really, really practical, you might reflect on a career, highs and lows, and you'll say, hey, at that moment I was in flow and I really enjoyed what I was doing. And it might be because you realize you like to work in a small team rather than a large team. It required you to be providing strategic direction or guidance and insight rather than following procedure. And it might have been in an environment where there was a lot of change rather than status quo. And so then, when you then translate that to saying, what's my true north? When am I at my best? You can, uh, think of that as a transferable bundle to say, well, it's working in tight knit teams where there's a lot of change and transformation occurring. And I can contribute to that and really make a meaningful impact. So, that's a very, very practical way that you can work through understanding your true north. And look, I think practicals are a really good way to approach things. And anyone can do that, reflecting on their career. You can kind of jump on your LinkedIn profile online and say, hey, when I look at the roles I've had, which are the ones or what are the experiences I've had in those roles that I really, really was engaged with, where are the roles where I wasn't. So it's a combination of, what are my strengths, what are the things I love doing, what's the environment that really, really motivates me, and what's the kind of team or structure where I perform at my best. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
makes sense. What's usually like a barrier that people have? Like, so it's quite tricky to acknowledge that for one, like people aren't aware of the problem, and then they're aware of the problem, and they're so overwhelmed at the idea of doing it. What's the red flag of sorts that indicates there isn't a true north in the leader and in the organization?
Yeah, so in a leader, and so that probably also asks the questions, well, why is it important to have a true north or a value proposition that's unique to you? So, Ryan, what's your value proposition? For Jeremy, what's my value proposition? So everyone needs to have almost their own imprint or their, unique proposition. And the reason it's important is so that people understand that you're human. You're not a robot. You're someone who's both a leader, but you've also got emotions, you've got connectivity, and you're, working as a human being, not just as a leader. Secondly, particularly in times of change where people may need to go through change, and that might include also finding a new role or moving to a new role, being really, really clear about what you're good at is really, really important. All right. So, and then also just in working within an organization, performing at your best and contributing the most you can, both as a leader and in a team, knowing what you're good at and when you are at your best. If you know what your true north is, that's how you can contribute more fully. So I guess, the value in understanding your true north is it means you can contribute more. It means that you are more valuable to an organization. It means that you are more comfortable when there might be change to kind of adapt and modify. To your question around red flags, I see this quite often when I work with executives who have perhaps been in a role for quite some time and then are perhaps looking at a career change, or perhaps working with them from a coaching perspective and helping them build out some of their more interpersonal skills, when they're unable to provide real life, very personal examples of where they've had challenges or what they like and what they don't like. So, a real red flag is when someone just provides vanilla answers to things and you don't feel like you're really hearing the real person. So a really good example of someone who, you feel like they've got their true north is they tell it like it is. They're not, they don't put their foot in it, but they might say, hey, here's what I think. Or, by the way, I might be unpopular, but here's what I'm seeing, as opposed to just sort of going along with the corporate line. So, it's, the red flag is you might be seeing, you're not hearing what you think might be what someone's true point of view is. There's a lack of authenticity.
Yeah, and on that game in corporate world, because I've dabbled in corporate for 1 second, which was just I got a job at McDonald's, and then I didn't make it past the trial because I tried to break things. But how do you maintain
You're in the
corporate?
innovation group? No?
No, it's just I didn't understand the system, so I tried to create a way to do it to work. But anyways, this is my fault. I got some free food. But just on the corporate side, like being able to maintain authenticity, when everything's sort of coming against you and everyone seems to play the game and be manipulative, like what's your thought on authenticity in the corporate world and how do you actually show up without being brought down? Put it that way.
Well, you've got to be comfortable and confident in yourself, and have a lens that is, you don't always have to win at all costs, right? And so that might sound a little counterintuitive for a corporate environment, but that's really, really important. So you've got to start with yourself and be comfortable with those two sort of foundational views, I guess. And I'd say that it's important to find a mentor or a supporter in an organization, because organizations are big places and you can just feel a part of the system. And so a starting point for that should always be your manager, right? And so, the number one reason individuals normally feel disengaged or leave the organization is, I don't have a connection with my manager, or I don't feel like my manager understands, what I want to do in my career, or not on the same page. The second one is always an issue around communication and, so forth. So what I'd say is, it's really important, not only for the organization to create an environment where people can feel safe, you individually to make sure that you find a manager or you find someone in the organization that you feel you can be yourself with, right? And then they need to support you to be authentic in your role. Ultimately, people who are authentic do shine through, and, there will be situations where there's politics at play. But, overall, the value of being yourself outweighs, trying to play the game, really.
It's interesting. I always wonder why, I get so really rewarded in my relationships professionally as well in authenticity and radical honesty. Like, it's very in sales. It's like, hey, I don't think you should buy this. It's not good for you. Oh, we're not good at this, but we're all right at this. What do you think that stems from? Why do you think people, at least that doesn't seem to be the default? Why are we not just, all super authentic?
Because I think, ultimately, people think they need to project a certain image. Not everyone's confidence comes from within. And if your confidence comes from approval from others, and being authentic is not always going to be the easiest thing to do. So authenticity requires a sense of self-belief and a willingness to, maybe be unpopular at times or be challenged. So, there's a lot of people who like to be liked, like to go with the flow. And so, sometimes that might mean that their actions are not authentic because they'll need to behave in a certain way not to be noticed or not to ruffle feathers, right? So that's kind of one of the reasons. So people, and that's ultimately about ego, not wanting to stand out. or wanting to fit in or wanting to feel safe or secure. So there's a lot of reasons internally why that's the case. I think also externally, you know, capitalism is not always about authenticity. Capitalism is about numbers and sales and so forth. And sometimes that can be quite brutal. And so as a result, sometimes people are not always as authentic. But ultimately, I don't think they end up being as successful. You know, you talk about sales and being authentic. I mean, sales is about being yourself, providing great insights, helping someone make a decision on something that's going to be of mutual benefit, right? And so you need to be credible and you need to be a trusted person. So it's a great example of needing to be authentic if you're a great salesperson. Definitely.
Oh yeah, no, it goes well. See, less churn.
How
But
do you
anyway,
learn that, right?
why that authenticity works. Well, there's a few books like I think Influence the Psychology of Persuasion, where a waiter would tell them that the most expensive wine wasn't the best and sold more wine than everyone else. But it was also probably for me, it stems from I don't trust people unless they're genuine because I'm afraid they're going to abandon me. So I try to understand them, and if they're going to be authentic, then I got to be authentic. So that's probably where it came from. And then I just tried it in sales. Like when I pretend to be someone, it's hard to sell. When I align with who I am, I build trust really quickly. So why don't I be more of who I am? And the consequence is very minimal.
Yeah.
Let's just do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. But so the point you make there around the waiter, that's one where, you know, if you're in sales, you want to help people understand that you are okay for them to make the right decision that's right for them, right? And it's not your self-interest that's driving it. And so that's what that does, right? It demonstrates that you're saying, hey, take it or leave it, I'm not attached to this. And it's interesting, actually, that bit around authenticity as people go through their careers, and certainly used to be, has been in my career, and I'm a hell of a lot older than you, so I'm in my mid-50s. When we used to join organizations back in the day, you know, out of university, it was all about the organizational brand. You know, you would aspire to join a brand because that brand, whether it be Telecom, which is now Spark, or Lion Nathan, which is now Lion, or Fitcher Building, whatever it was, looked really great and you could be part of that brand. Whereas then as you grow up and you become a leader and go through that organization, your personal brand becomes more, at some stage, eclipses that brand of that organization, right? So that's the kind of journey that leaders need to go on. But what's different about it these days, quite refreshing actually, is that I think graduates these days are not necessarily allured by the brand. They're saying, which brand can I park my brand at? You know, so I think there's a new generation of people like yourself, you know, who are saying, hey, I'm authentic and I'm about myself. And, you know, where will I park for a while and how will I contribute rather than how will I be necessarily part of and add into this brand? It's really refreshing. It's good.
Yeah, I sort of see it as the older generations, you do it out of a sense of duty and security because you had unsecure times. And then they raise kids where the kids want to have a sense of meaning and freedom, which leads to them being perceived as complacent because they're not doing their duty. Or when they've found meaning, they're actually really good workers. So, but I'll be curious on the value prop. You need to pull together the value prop. You got your true north, and now you got to tell people about it. How do you pull that together?
Well, I think the number one thing is not to broadcast. So, you know, what I always encourage people to do is almost like a little Venn diagram, you know, that sort of says, you know, when I'm at my best, here's the things, the strengths I'm using, here's the places I like to do it, and here's the things that really, really motivate me. And be really, really honest with people about that. And you know, in a scenario, for instance, where, you know, a leader might be thinking about, you know, I'm going to move on for a new role, or I'm being changed in direction within my organization. Really, really encourage them to be clear about that proposition, but then take an exploratory approach to understanding where they can best add value. And so, you know, in a case of if they might be looking for a new role outside the organization, you know, who are the 15 or 20 senior other people that they have known throughout their career they can go and have a conversation to say, hey, look, I've been doing some navel gazing and I've had some insights, and I realized that, for the rest of my career, here's where I really want to add value. And here's where I think I'm at my best. Where do you see opportunities to do that? Right. And so using it as a basis for being proactive about finding an opportunity for them moving forward. But then also, secondly, using it almost as a bit of a compass, because there'll always be someone say, "Oh, that's great, Jeremy, but by the way, we've got this opportunity, and gosh, it pays a lot. And yes, you could be part of a team, but it might only be 30% of what you think is your value proposition." And so, how can you be true to yourself and say, "Well, am I going to sell out and do that? Well, if I am, that's fine. At least I'm being honest with myself. But otherwise, how am I going to hold off from doing that?" Right? So, and you can use that same value prop, thinking about how, in any given week or any given month you've worked in your role in an organization. Kind of just use it as a bit of a marker, ask people for feedback, on how you're doing. So keep it practical, keep it really, really simple. You don't need to use heaps of overly technical, detailed assessments. Just, something on how you want to be and how you want to work and be at your best is really useful.
And I sort of see purpose as like, okay, what's the most painful thing I've witnessed or experienced that seems to be a theme in my life, and how do I solve it for others? That's usually how I find purpose. And then in terms of I see values as filters. So I've got these opportunities to solve these problems. I'm going to use my values as the determining factor on whether I pursue it or not. What do you think about so you got the value proposition, and now you want to communicate to the team like where we're going? Is there a good way to go about it? Do you sit them down? Do you go one-on-one? Like, how do you manage your true north at scale?
What do you mean by that? Can you expand a bit more?
So one of the things I used to do when we train salespeople, and I'm a new person, I'll write on the board, what are your expectations of me? Write it down, and then I say, if I do this, what are your expectations? Can I have of you? They're like this. So then we're all in agreement. I'm just not sure. I've decided my true north. Now I got to tell the team, hey, I've got this vision. This is where we're going. I'm really excited. How do you get them involved? What's that process? Do you help them find their true north? How do you go about it?
Yeah. I think the key bit around that is having an environment where feedback and communication is fluid, right? And so it doesn't have to be a thing, doesn't have to be a workshop. I think through the way you communicate, and more importantly, the way you act, you demonstrate what's important to you. And then it's about actively seeking feedback and input, whether that be in one-on-ones, whether that be in team meetings, and demonstrating that it's a safe environment to agree or disagree and contribute, and giving your team the opportunity to have their say, right? So there's some, terms like psychological safety these days, which is all about individuals feeling comfortable to be able to speak up and say their mind, share what's on their mind, and without fear of consequence, right? So, you can't just say, hey, here's what's going on. What are we doing? It needs to be demonstrated. So I think that how you go about doing it is your actions and your words, and you find the touch points to be able to do that. Whether it's on one-on-ones, whether it's on, asking for ways that, the team can engage more fully, so it's just not one size fits all silver bullet, Ryan. Yeah.
Cool. And just on the one size fits all side of things, is there a specific example, either a person started here and then you sort of worked through this and the outcome was that, just to sort of give someone an example of what their journey looks like and the value they can get if they go on it?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a guy I did some work with who was a technology, like CIO, CTO level guy, who really had quite a creative streak. We'd worked in some big corporate organizations, and we spent several sessions working through what his true north was. And for him, it was a real shift to greater level of creativity and contribution. but working with multiple organizations rather than working in one organization. So he had been very successful, but knee deep in technical enterprise-wide commercial kind of IT stuff. And we went through a sort of change and transformation process. And what he decided was he wanted to work with smaller, bite-sized organizations and creating a digital experience and interface with consumers and also internally. And so he went through and set up his own consultancy business. So he's shifted from being an internal CIO, CTO to an external consultant, still working in technology, but shifting from sort of an enterprise commercial requirements to the whole sort of ideation, creative aspect, and then supporting it with digital technology, advising organizations. The challenge for him and the gap he had to fill was how does he go out and network, and how does he go out and get people to buy his service? And he did that by being really, really authentic about who he was and telling his story. So he was able to say, hey, I've sat in your shoes. I've been a CTO or CIO. I decided what I really want to be is this. Here's what I know. Here's what I don't. Here's what I love what I'm doing. I'd love to be able to work with you. And he said, great success. Yeah, so he's a really real happy camper. So he's shifted from one to another, still using a number of his skills, but he's being his authentic best person.
Perfect. All right. Well, there's our podcast, Energy Efficient. So thanks for coming on.
Nice, mate. Cheers, Ryan.